Eric, you want to tell us a little bit about the spaces that you created for the Miami, Bitcoin event, and how did that work with the conference?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we're starting to get a lot of traction with large scale events. Typically, these events have over 10,000 people attending. So the way that the Miami Crypto Conference came around was we have a platform that does NFT tickets for both physical events and for digital events. And so naturally, the digital events interfaces into our 3D World platform. So the Miami Crypto Experience Conference, they approached us to create an NFT platform for the tickets to get into the venue. And then they saw our immersive worlds and they're like, hey, can you make a digital twin of what we're doing? So, naturally, we love a challenge, and we said, yeah. So we think of it as kind of like a shopping mall. So it's got different parts or different rooms to the world. Everything is what they call 6 degrees of freedom, meaning you can kind of walk around in it. And our primary audience is smartphone users, so it works in the browser, so you don't have to download anything. And so as you're walking around the world, the different rooms in this, AKA shopping mall, the first one's going to be like the trade show area. The second one's going to be the webinar area. So where you have all the different workshops and the different webinars. And within that, we have a thing called Watch Party. So when you buy the ticket, you can invite 10 of your friends, and then you have a private chat around all the content that you're seeing and watching. And then we have a partnership with a sporting event that we haven't announced yet what it is going to be, but there's going to be a sporting event also within the world. So that's kind of like the entertainment. And let's see, trade show, and I'm missing one other room, but it will come to me in a minute what the other room is. But yeah, they're super fun, and they're people haven't really seen these things before. So yeah, it's a lot of fun just watching people, experience it for the first time, and then realizing that, this concept of a metaverse and what it means and how the next generation of the web is actually going to transpire, especially when you're using NFTs as the means of payment. Oh yeah, that was what the other room is. The other room is it's an NFT art gallery. So all the art that's physically on the wall in the physical conference. So they have 65,000 square feet set aside all around for the conference. Those art pieces are also going to be in the world. And the world that we built out for them on the NFT art gallery is very similar to Top Shots. So it's kind of like a four-sided cube, and on each cube are going to be either animations or MPEG-4 or some sort of thing. And pretty much most of them have some sort of 3D component also to it. Yeah, that's kind of what we do. And we're pretty big now. We're over 132 employees. So we've expanded quite rapidly. And, in a lot of ways, COVID was kind of like the best thing for us because it helped push a lot of companies to realize that they can do a lot of these events online as opposed to in person. And it saves on travel costs, and it also opens up the opportunity for a global audience as opposed to, a local or an audience that has the wherewithal to fly in. So yeah, that's what we do.
That's super awesome, Eric. You should 100% tap on my profile and see what it says there.
Oh, cool.
There's probably seem to be generation devices are also important. We got our first funding yes on August 4th. So bringing smart glasses to this market.
Oh, cool. How exciting.
Awesome.
Eric, I just want to say as an executive conference producer, I already checked out your site. I'm extremely impressed. I spend a lot of time working in hybrid events and conferences, multi-day conferences, and I definitely will be looking deeper into your technology. By chance, are you guys doing any demos anytime soon, or what is the best way to go about actually seeing one of these virtual events?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, just ping me. You can email me or do a LinkedIn on me, and just send me a DM via LinkedIn. I'm like literally we're working like 20-hour days, so I'm not I'm not really on Instagram or anything else.
Totally understood. I prefer LinkedIn as well. Definitely will be connecting with you there.
Cool. Yeah,
definitely
awesome.
have some really interesting aspects of even integrating the NFT into the space.
Yep.
Ironically, I also work in the aesthetics and anti-aging business.
Oh, wow.
Putting together conferences, and I could see this being a huge thing for doctors, specifically for doing surgeries virtually.
Yeah.
So let's definitely explore this. Definitely want to talk to you further. I'll send you a LinkedIn message.
Yeah. The other traction that we're getting right now is museums. And they're really excited just because a lot of them had to do capacity limitations due to COVID. And it looks like they're going to have to do the same thing this coming up winter. So, what they're asking us to do is photogrammetry or volumetric capture of different artifacts or different rooms. And then also make that again for a global audience. And the cool thing is that a lot of times when we build out these experiences for museums, we have two that are coming up Q1 of next year, is that these actually complement the physical experience if you do go to the museum. So they don't actually compete there, because a lot of times you get additional information that you wouldn't really get if you go there on your own, unless you have like a curated or some sort of chaperone that actually gives you a walkthrough. And most of the experiences that we build out are relatively inexpensive. The 2D ones are about $8, and the 3D ones are about $20. So we try to make it accessible for everybody.
That's awesome. We also had a presentation by EcoFi, which is the staking of NFTs. And I just want to see if you guys can tell us a little bit more about your project here in the club.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Kevin from EcoFi again. Basically, there's two parts of our platform. One is staking. They're just the ERC20 tokens, but it's basically a utility token. There's currently 72.5% of the current supply is locked in staking. So it's definitely being used in the utility it was intended to. And then the second part of our platform, or our secondary platform, is a NFT marketplace hub. So we're about to launch the company's marketplace on there. It's called Hype. And then we'll be shortly after releasing a secondary marketplace called HyperObject, which is done with Sovo, who is a digital magazine. They do art curation. They've been around for a long time. They will be helping us out with finding new artists. But what we're doing is connecting real life assets to NFTs. So we are fractionalizing fine art and then selling NFT sets of them on our platform, where we will basically, if you the sets of some of these paintings, we have paintings by Picasso, Andy Warhol, Van Gogh, Salvador Dali, and they're all originals. We have the provenance inserts. We've gotten them from the Museum of Art in New York, a couple galleries in Spain and Cuba. So we've kind of acquired these from pretty reputable sources, and we'll be splitting them into fractions. And at the point that anyone generates an entire set, they can send us the set, and we will mint you a ERC 721 token, one of one, and send you the actual physical art piece.
That's really cool. I like art and stuff. I was looking at your site here, and I was wondering, yeah, you can collect, get a collection built up, and then you can request to receive it. I was curious, how do you guys store it, or do you guys have something that I may have missed?
Okay, so currently
How that
they're
works?
in a vault. We just have a place that we have a location that they're all being stored, that's controlled. Um, but we are basically at the point that we have enough capital to start a gallery. We have been in talks with space kind of in the area, that we can house all these things. So we are planning on making a public gallery for this, where you can actually go use your shares to go view it if you want. But additionally, we'll be working with Gather.town, and then these other guys that do these frogmen NFTs, but they also build virtual spaces where you can go and use your NFT to basically sign that you own it, and then you can go view this thing in VR or AR on your phone currently, but we should have it on Oculus and stuff very shortly.
We should
Okay,
have
cool.
this, oh, sorry. We should have this kind of staking, I think, maybe co-developed with you and Superworld, because I've been advising them since the beginning, and they're displaying quite a bit of art. I think they have a relationship with about 700 artists in Superworld, but it would be very interesting to add some of these DeFi concepts to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Our code is all open source, so anyone can use any of it, or you can go look at it. We're staking 720 or what's called ERC20 tokens that are used as the utility token on our platform. But but anyone, like, basically you can take and modify this code. It exists on our GitHub. But yeah, it's there for anyone to use if you want to like get on a call at any point and have us kind of walk you through how it works. Values can be changed and stuff if you wanted the generation rate to be different, etc. Um, most most companies that are doing compounding interest on blockchain right now are basically hyperinflating. It creates a lot too fast because compounding interest on with using smart contracts is not the easiest thing in the world to do, and tends to end up rushing itself. So what we did is we used two sets of um, linear growth and basically combined them using two different time limits essentially. But the generation is by second, so it's kind of cool because it's not like a bank where every year something compounds, or every couple of months something compounds. It's every second that the interest compounds. So it was just a different way to think about how to generate interest like that.
So it's almost like not only that you can teach collectors and artists how to purchase NFTs and or mint NFTs, but now you can teach them how to stake NFTs in their NFT collections, and they can use your open source code to do that.
So we don't have it set up to do NFTs. We have it set up to do ERC20s. So they're not NFTs. It's the original tokens that were used on Ethereum. That you can basically, there's so many different contracts out, but we do have in our code there's the code for minting your token or whatever. So if an artist had a token and they wanted people to like kind of invest in them, they could go and use this contract, launch it with their own token, and then people could stake their token, for artworks or whatever. You can basically set it up however you want. And at the point that we launch our marketplaces, we are also going to launch a template so that if an artist or anybody else that wants to list a marketplace on our platform, we're going to make it really easy for you to do.
So they can add DeFi to the NFTs business they.
Yeah, you could basically just go and make yourself a marketplace using code that already exists that works.
This is fascinating. I feel like we've just gone, a few years ahead of ourselves.
I was gonna say, can we chat offline? Because I'm on literally line 1631 of writing an NFT marketplace in Solidity, and I'd love to not have to finish this project.
I'm
and
pretty
just
sure most
open
of our
source
code,
this.
like our Solidity code, is like 75 lines. So we use like Open Zeppelin stuff. We use a lot of people stuff that's very like audited and tested, and we've incorporated that for our initial contracts for our staking platform. I actually went out in February to work with. We went out and worked in Switzerland for 10 days and built all of the contracts. And the goal of it was to make them as lean as possible so that people would pay the least amount of gas. And I think our longest contract is 150 lines. So we're very much getting rid of the bloat in contracts.
That is awesome. And what's so funny is people talk about that all the time. The ability to be concise for a writer is actually like part of what makes them a great writer, right? It's the same thing with coding. If you can do it in 75 lines and it does all the same functionality, it's way more bulletproof than 1631. But
Yeah,
I haven't coded in 20 years. So
I believe we're
actually,
saying brevity is the soul of wit.
yes.
So yes. We went out, we use True Level, and True Level has a couple of the best contract writers I've ever met in my life. They've been writing on Solidity since Solidity was written, and we know the guy that wrote Solidity. So they're very good at what they do. And I just went out and kind of helped out, gave them the idea and the direction and the basis of what needed to happen. And they just kind of took my code that was, it was probably about 1,500 lines, and they took it and they made it, a couple hundred.
Fascinating.
There are a number, I'm actually testing a number of kind of plug and play NFT marketplaces to see who does what, where, how much, all that kind of stuff. And what's interesting is most of these, like have your own NFT on your own website kind of things. They're written in more obscure blockchains. And it's really interesting because they're fast and they're cheap and they're, for $10 a month, you can mint as much as you want. everybody still has this one missing piece, which is we need some kind of universal credit card, debit card onboarding process with the ability to take something back if they do a chargeback or something like that. That's the one thing that I think we're missing before we can completely take over the consumer market.
Completely agree.
Yeah, the biggest problem with that is it costs a
We
lot of
can't have
time
a
to get the
finalized
license.
transaction and also have the opportunity for chargeback unless we build in some sort of like insurance structure where like, you know, we bleed off some of the amount of value somehow, which goes into like some sort of insurance. And, you know, we know that the chargebacks are going to be infrequent enough that like that comes out of this other fund. So it's not actually reversing the charge, but just, you know, making them whole from this other or whatever.
Well, you
Like,
can.
honestly, that's the only way I see something like.
Oh no, believe it or not, there's another way. So you got to go read the contract. Remember a few months ago, I was talking about how Mr. Nobody sleep minted Beeple's version 2 of 5,000 days. They used one of the other financial code models at ERC protocol, and they used that, which has the ability, it's for the big banks, they have to have the ability to do takebacks. So there is already code in there that will automatically move something upon some trigger. And so that's how Mr. Nobody did it, is he minted the ER 721, but using a lot of this other code from the big bank financial ERC code base that allowed him to mint it in this particular wallet and move it to this other wallet. And that is possible. People don't like to think about that you know that crypto could be moved magically, but the big banks have to, for audit purposes, for security purposes, for KYC and AML. Heaven forbid they find a fraud or they find a money laundering, they have to be able to control and move it, otherwise they're out of compliance. So the code actually exists to do that. It really does.
That's interesting, Adrian.
You
Can
got
you
to
tell me
dive
more
down my
about
rabbit holes, trust me, they are funny and interesting, and you'll blink and it'll be 48 hours later and you haven't slept, but it's worth it.
care to point me in the right direction?
Yeah, I'll see if I can dig it up. But look up Mr. Nobody, right? Beeple version 2. It was minted in Beeple's wallet while he was asleep. So anybody who looked at it and did, and looked at the Etherscan would see that it was minted in Beeple's wallet and then moved to this other wallet. And so they'd say, "Oh, well, it's got to be original." No, it doesn't have to be original. That's the whole point. This is why I'm so hyped on this sovereign ID that I'm working on, because it's about authenticating what's minted in your wallet. Your wallet isn't the authentication, you the human have to authenticate. That's another missing piece. But if we do it this way, then we would be able to easily do credit card onboarding with the ability that, it's going to be on your reputation if you do a chargeback, or if you do any fraud, it'll be tagged to your reputation. So first we have to make sure that everybody's human. Then we have to encourage good behavior. Then we have to document not good behavior with a whole grand jury process. Then we can have credit card onboarding, debit card onboarding safely and not have to worry about chargeback.
Fascinating. I feel that the inner chain NFT swaps are coming. With Andrew, you can do it today, but I think they're coming even in the traditional NFT marketplaces as you guys solve a variety of these problems. I wonder if anybody can actually tell us, you know, would the NFTs, as you pointed out, Adrian, really take over the consumer space? And, how is this going to happen and maybe why?
I think CryptoKitties would have gone much further had it not frustrated people like me, because I couldn't figure out, I've never been able to buy one. And I just got so frustrated now I won't, just because there's just too much PTSD in the back.
Because now
But
I
my
don't
friends,
want it.
no, I do want it, but now they're too expensive. But my friend's daughter has been breeding them since she was buying them for like $7 with her allowance when she was, 7, 8 years old. She's amassed quite the fortune and does not have to worry about paying for college anymore. And I think that if we have the ability, I think Sweet.io is a good example. When you're talking about those atomic swaps, we do that in that platform all the time. That's built on Bitcoin Cash. It takes money up front. Everything's done with your Apple Pay. It's super easy. It's super consumer friendly. I think that they don't have the plethora of options and choices. It's a very limited selection that you can do on the app, although they do custom work for a bunch of other people. So the technology is in use, it's just not in that app. I think if that app had really viral things like CryptoPunks, CryptoKitties, all these other things, and they were more reasonably priced, like in Suite, most things are $1.99 to $19.99. Some of them are $25, but really it's nothing too expensive. So you're not talking about crazy stuff. That I think is going to drive consumer adoption, especially if you get a major celebrity to drop their stuff in something like that, where their fans can get in for $1.99. Then you really start getting that big mass adoption.
So something we've been talking about, we've been kind of talking to a couple of big companies recently, is getting like verified contracts from companies like Cartier or Rolex, where you move their sorts of authenticity to blockchain and NFTs. And the NFT that you get it is your sort of authenticity, but what it does is it's an encrypted NFT. So anyone can go scan this QR code, but it's going to take you to a place that you need to be able to sign. You need to own an NFT in order to sign to get your cert of authenticity's information. And what this does, if you have a contract that's actually verified by Cartier, you eliminate a huge chunk of the forgery market, because you can no longer say that like give someone a fake cert of authenticity, because when they go and try and sign, Cartier's contract's going to be like, this isn't a real thing. And so basically, when you get a partnership with like a corporate company like this, you don't even need mainstream adoption, you kind of force it. So it's like, if you get a single company to do this and they eliminate a huge chunk of like their missed revenue because of the fact that forgeries right now are a really big problem, every other company kind of has to hop on, or they just kind of deal with this loss.
Oh no, this is the perfect thing, right? So we've been doing this with reselling Rolexes. I say the royal we. It's actually not my company, but they do a tremendous amount of obscure, very high end, very collectible Rolexes, and they're NFTing them, and putting that as part of it. But Rolex could do this. Louis Vuitton could do this. A woman that I met back in 2015, I want to say 16, is doing it for the luxury goods market. And the reason that this would be so important for them, and I don't believe that they've really latched onto this idea, is if they NFT each unique individual item, number one, they'll be able to track the resale market. They'll be able to track the price things. They can go, oh, this particular bag is like super collectible. Everybody loves it. We haven't made the style in 20 years. Maybe it's the style. And then they could actually ping out to everybody who owns it and, send them a survey with a little gift card for something, find out, is it really the style? Then they could make a new style, but they could also benefit from every resale with a royalty. It's like the smartest thing that they could do, because I think I've had one of my Louis Vuittons for 35 years. Like, we don't get rid of them ever.
Yeah, and so we're kind of doing something similar, because we're doing
Mariana's question. Getting back to Mariana's question on how to get to the mass market, and that we're doing it from video games. There's 2.8 billion game players on the planet, and you get games like Fortnite that get over 1 billion players in there. What we have to do is convince them that NFTs are beneficial to them, and we do that from our point of view through player acquisition. Right now, over 50% to 99.5% of any video game goes into customer acquisition, and we have figured out how to remove that cost and replace it with them just generating more video game items. On our platform, it doesn't cost them anything to make them into NFTs, because of the way we do it. And then we get something like a Fortnite on there. That'll bring in the consumer market. That'll bring in millions upon millions of players. And you have to have a system and systems underneath that handle that amount of traction. We want hundreds of millions of players on the system, not 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, which a lot of these other NFT marketplaces seem to be built for.
Hey, Andrew, this is super brief. If your microphone is off and you see a gray ring around your profile, that means that the sound is bouncing off a nearby object to the microphone and coming back, which gives us reverb, basically. So try to, if you keep mic off, or keep the mic muted if you can. And then EcoFi, else wanted to hear what you had to say.
Okay. What I was talking about is this is where like we're doing like third party authentication. We have like people, the artists that we're selling the art from, they're dead, so you can no longer get the artist themselves to say that this is my piece. Whereas if we got a partnership with Cartier, or if Rolex started wanting to do this, you could have verified contracts on blockchain that Cartier has verified as their contract. So it's not a third party; it is an actual direct source, and basically everything would be issued with this. So you no longer like basically you're forcing NFTs upon consumers instead of, you know, asking them to figure out how they work. And then you know that if you get this thing without the NFT, that it's a fake. So you know, third party authentication is great, because there are some, you know, protections there and you trusted sources. But if you can actually get the direct source with like a direct verified contract, you actually have something very real, which is a really cool thing. And I think that would be a big step towards, you know, mainstream adoption, is getting companies that actually do like authentication anyway, and just getting them to stick them as NFTs, because then you could trace things back to the source, see where it went, and make sure that like your whatever you're getting came from that source.
You know, we're doing that with real estate in Wyoming. And here in Nevada, we actually put marriage licenses on the blockchain and have for several years. So it is slowly creeping into the mainstream vernacular and understanding what it is with these certificates of authenticity, because that makes logical sense to people. They're like, oh, I know what a COA is, like that translation. So it's kind of like we're doing the step by step by step. And thankfully, I think right now, if everybody remembers back to the VHS and Betacam wars, VHS won, even though beta was actually the better format. And it was like the junior version of the Betacam SP professional format that we all used in entertainment. But then it went VHS. And the reason it could go to DVD so easily and quickly is because we already had CDs. We knew what they were. That's the key thing. And that's what I'm doing with my dating app is everybody knows what a dating app is. They don't have to understand blockchain. They don't have to understand how everything works under the hood. It's a familiar concept. So video games and those in-game assets and winning those things or earning them, as long as you avoid you have to pay to win, that will set off a firestorm that will turn audiences off like nothing, like there's no tomorrow. However, as long as there's a way to play to win where you can earn these things and keep them and their NFTs, that is the golden ticket right there. That is the most brilliant way to get them.
The live event thing and like access to places like tickets essentially is also a huge thing. Like if you could get like any kind of major like NBA, NFL to start incorporating NFTs in their tickets, this is something that is huge. I think Andrew was another one that was doing something like this. But like event tickets, like basically access via NFT. Like you can't forge tickets if they're NFTs. They came from a contract. You either have it or you don't. So I mean that's another huge industry that this.
Ironically, I just want to chime in here real quick about that specifically. Ticketmaster has already acquired a couple major companies or startups in that space, and they already have blockchain tracking on their tickets. And they also are going to be integrating it into their parking just because they've been speaking at my events. So definitely that is on the horizon in the enterprise space. And then just to take to dovetail off the luxury goods space, the key reason for the watches being certified on blockchain being so valuable, for example, to a collector, is because they can actually reduce their insurance cost. So, say for example, you have $1 million watch, obviously you have to pay insurance on that. Well, if you have credibility through a blockchain, ultimately at the end of the day through an NFT, you're able to track that back and reduces your insurance cost. So that's really what they're trying to look at
One more thing on
from a
that.
collector standpoint.
Oh my goodness, from the collectors, you brought up such an amazing thing. So if you look at OG Pay, it's a wallet, a crypto wallet, their whole OG 2D, original to digital, their NFTs, if you hold that NFT, and I have to double check and make sure it's an NFT you could have bought from anywhere. But if you hold that NFT in your wallet, your crypto is insured up to $30 million from loss. So, and if the actual item is minted and sold on OG2D, it's all the authenticity is built in. So that's another way for people who are wanting to do that, you can actually pipeline in through that and their back end authenticity because they have a background in art authenticity, and then get that insurance as an added bonus for anybody purchasing your stuff.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that. That's great.
Yeah, this room is like deep alpha.
It's like the best room every week.
Yeah, can I add more?
So I had a question about the retail concept behind using certificates of authenticity with, higher end goods. What what exactly makes that one particular use case so appealing in comparison to companies already out there right now in the tech space doing something like that maybe aren't built solely around the notion of using like blockchain, for example, like entropy.
I'd,
Ah, it's
I'd say because the mechanism is so simple for certs of authenticity, and currently you get a piece of paper. Like a piece of paper is in a serial number on whatever it is. That's not really a good method. I can forge pretty much any piece of paper just by going and making a photocopy of it and trying to get the paper to feel the same. So with NFTs, especially if you had verified contracts by the actual source, you can't fake those, and you cannot fake ownership of an NFT. Like you either have the address and access to it and can sign that you have access to this address, or you can't. Um, so it eliminates a huge access to forgers, and
it's also easily trackable. So you can track when there are bad actors, when people like when they just stole the 600 million Ethereum from Poly, they literally went ahead to these other platforms and they blocked those addresses. All a blockchain does is prove who did wrong. I mean, it's literally a ledger of what actually happened. So if there's misbehavior, you can track it. And it's the same thing with these forgeries. If somebody goes out and they mint, what Mr. Nobody did, he minted a forgery. It wasn't minted on the same contract, right? So this is where the layman has to look. No, it wasn't just minted in that wallet. It was minted with what contract? Automated systems can check to make sure that it was minted with the correct contract in the correct wallet and have all of these little checkpoints to then give it that validation using a dynamic thing. You can have dynamic content updated on your NFTs so that when they show it, it'll have that dynamic rubber stamp that can be added to it that says this is an authentic one.
it's like the
And that's super easy.
it's like the blue check marks on Twitter that say this is actually the account that it came from. Basically, if you had someone like Rolex say like this is our contract, everything in the system, like everyone would have something in place. Like there would be a protocol that says this is Cartier's contract or this is Rolex's contract. This is not a random addresses contract. Like when you pulled it up on Etherscan, it would literally say Cartier up at the top or Rolex up at the top. It wouldn't say OX and a bunch of numbers. You'd be like, if you
Right.
ever saw that, you would be like, okay, this is obviously not legit because there are verified.
Because Rolex can afford to hire someone very cheaply even to authenticate and certify their wallet address so that it comes up with their logo, with their name, with everything else as certified.
And
It's not
what's
rocket
interesting,
science.
yeah, what's interesting, I think Christian's presentation on real use cases of NFTs, which really talks about supply chain management in the way that you guys are describing. It's on the YouTube channel. We edited just his, it's like a 10-minute presentation. It's worth viewing. If you're working with any sort of a supply chain management issue like authenticating consumer products, validating them, etc. I think it's the most seamless way to do supply chain management. It is with NFTs. We had some questions from Jordan. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, hey, how's it going, everybody? Just a little bit of background on me. I have some really cool ideas about NFTs in my space. So I started a contract manufacturing firm in 2015 for cosmetics and skincare and beauty products and things like that. Last year we were number 17 on Inc. 5000 list. This year we're 240. Things are going really well, and we're really entrepreneurial and innovative and trying to bring new ideas to the space. And the idea of NFTs came up because some beauty brands in the space are already starting to do that with formulations. And we strictly only manufacture for third parties, so we don't manufacture anything for ourselves. So my question is I think this is something that will gain a lot of traction in the beauty space because the IP of these formulations is so important. Whether the brand owns it or, the private equity firm that owns the brand owns it, like Kylie Cosmetics, for example, that's $1 billion brand. And we want to be able to be like the first manufacturer to start offering these NFTs to our customers. You guys are the experts. I'm not. So thank you for taking my question.
You know, the irony right there is that, since I do work in aesthetics and anti-aging, I can tell you, and I'm sure you're aware of this, the reputation of having fake injections is very bad in the industry. So I think that you are definitely on track with the allergens and the Galdermas of the world, who are probably thinking the exact same thing because there's so many fake products that are currently being injected into people by, let's just say, questionable doctors or people who are aesthetics technicians. So that being said, yes, definitely think it's a great space. Congratulations on your growth. I'd love to hear more about your company. I know you didn't mention their names, so maybe you might want to throw it out there unless you're keeping it privy.
The name of my manufacturing company, is that what you mean?
Correct.
Yeah, it's called dynamicblending.com is our website.
That's awesome.
Oh,
And can
that's
I just say, I can't imagine anyone with even just 2 brain cells thinking it's a good idea to inject something akin to botulism that doesn't have a major brand label that you could sue if something were to go wrong. It's botulism. That just seems like such a risky thing. I only go to my plastic surgeon and I only have the one person ever shoot me up with the stuff I know is the real stuff.
So this is also where like you could like essentially serial numbers of things you could come into play is basically if you every time like a medical facility got these injections in, there's a QR code that basically when they purchased these things they were sent an NFT that basically it contained all of their serial codes, essentially the information for them. So when you get these boxes, you scan your QR code and then you use those NFTs to check to see if you actually have a valid serial or not. So there's all kinds of ways to like basically mitigate the fake injections as well.
And then inventory too, because you have a lot of injectors that are like having their friends come over and like, oh yeah, I can do your lips, I can do this, I can do that, and and all of a sudden you're like, why am I 10 vials short?
But what's so
Yeah.
interesting is when we discussed this in our room, we realized that if you listen to a few conferences in the crypto space where some of the top crypto experts say that everything that's not consumable will be an NFT, what we believe and have seen firsthand with companies we worked with, that everything that is consumable should be an NFT because you want to know the origin of what's consumable, right? One of the best examples of using blockchain for supply chain management was Bumblebee Tuna back in 2019. So they were a little bit ahead of the market and it was before NFTs. But they were tracking where that tuna was it farmed? Was it, wild caught? And then how did it travel? How was it processed? And everything was tracked on the blockchain with each can of tuna that actually gets to a consumer's, kitchen. And I feel that with cosmetics products, that is really a key ingredient to a successful supply chain management. We worked with a company in the cannabis space and in the healthcare space that's tracking COVID tests, vaccinations, etc. But if you have a QR code on the product, that's what they've done, and the consumer can scan that QR code or some other code. We've seen a bunch of different types of codes available in the market, then you can actually track the entire chain of where that product is coming from, has been until it was consumed. So I
Yeah,
think
So it
that's
occurs to me that in the healthcare space, there'd be or like in the injection space, as you were discussing, there'd be the opportunity to additionally create a site that, because you're probably not going to be scanning a code, or if somebody hands you a box with a code, you don't necessarily know that that's where that's coming from, right? But like, if you have a site for Roses, whatever the place that you are happy to get these injections, and you can look and see that they have bought, this many certified, doses of whatever this month, and that what I mean, like, and you can track on the blockchain, like, I mean that gives the opportunity for like outward facing visibility on something like that, which would also be the opportunity to like kind of bring to be like a somewhat of a marketing place or a way to find the places that are using the real value, which which just then adds to the brand of the person producing the pharmaceutical, right? Because they could just have this outward facing, like, see who has our certified whatever active this month, or you know what I mean.
What was interesting is we did this in 2015, not as an NFT, but similarly to track organic food. And we had this whole Meet the Farmer thing going on with our organic food stores here in Reno, and had this whole like video compilation. You could literally look at it and scan, like, this is the trees, this is this, this is this. But it was all done with a database, and it would be so easy to do that supply chain on the blockchain now and do that exact same thing. So when you're buying your food, you know where it came from, where it comes from.
I think
I
that
think something worth keeping in mind here is that a lot of these use cases sound great, but are they really feasible in some cases? So, for example, the Bumblebee tuna, that one was fantastic. And I actually remember being at the Ethereal Summit, what was like 3 or 4 years ago, eating a piece of tuna, and they were telling me this is exactly where it came from in the South Pacific. It's fantastic, but then first there's a problem of how do I really know that indeed that QR code is linked to this can that I'm eating right now? Second, Bumblebee did this like investment that didn't come for free. Did the consumers Are the consumers willing to pay an extra 10 cents because they know exactly where that can of tuna came from? Or would they be just as happy with I don't know, Rainforest Alliance certification that simply looks at the operations every 3 months?
yeah,
Uh,
Daniel,
they're just Mhm.
this is something I've been writing about for a while now, and what we're finding is that yes, a lot of consumers are willing to spend 10 cents more to know where their food comes from, because
But would
um
they trust it? Because this is an example that I've seen, for example, in coffee, where people are just as likely to trust the Rainforest Alliance certification as a QR code that gives you way more information that not everybody's going to check. So usually the challenge with like this type of implementations is that the blockchain implementation ends up being a cost center as opposed to a revenue center.
I,
It's at best a marketing cost.
yeah,
And
well,
then
I do think that it is in many cases a marketing situation, and there is a halo effect not only from the tracking but also the tech forwardness of these companies, and so I think there's a lot of opportunities in this space, in many different avenues for NFTs and for blockchain, to connect products with social good, and I think that is ultimately going to be one of the big marketing wins for this whole space.
but now let's assume that okay, fine. Let's assume that the consumers do trust that path. For the cases where you actually don't have multiple counterparties and you can actually trust a single entity, for example, in the case of the Botus injections, you only care about the manufacturer. So instead of having an NFT for every injection, why not simply have the website that manufactures them put an online database that people can go and then they can just go and check it there. Same thing is like back in Brazil, Johnny Walker tried to do something to make sure that there wouldn't be any bootleg Johnny Walker. Uh, but it's very hard because it only works if everybody actually checks every single bottle when they buy it and that the seller actually marks it as sold when it was sold. Or else, any bottle that was not marked by either the seller or the buyer, that QR code can be saved to then use it with a bottle that is not really Johnny Walker. So it's kind of like a system that works if everybody's playing by the rules. But
So
then when you
actually,
have
if
a portion not playing by the rules, then it breaks.
you only need the suppliers to play by the rules. Like after the basically, so that QR code. So this is where the encryption of QR codes comes into play, because that NFT, what it's going to do is unlock the data. So anyone can copy that QR code. Sure, that's great. But if you don't have access to the address that owns the NFT, you can't actually access that data, which means it's a fake.
No, but if I go to a bar and I buy a bottle of whiskey, how do I know that it's real? The bottle's gonna have a QR code. Maybe it's a scratch off, and I need to. I know if I scratch it off, then I see the barcode or something. But
It'll
the
be
fact
the
of the matter
bar
is that
when so I guess the bar at the bar level, from the bar to you, there could be a discrepancy in how this works, but basically the bar is going to have the NFT that verifies that those bottles that came in those cases a real Johnny Walker.
Oh yeah,
If that
exactly.
bar decided to refill those bottles at the bar, absolutely. There's always a discrepancy in where this
no,
happened.
exactly. But that's the heart of the problem. All that, like the dilution of whiskey at the bar, that's where it happens. It's never an issue with the distributor. It's at
with
the
the with
consumer, and the consumer
I,
is the one that allegedly is going to pay extra or benefit from the marketing that this has been traced ever since like the thing was distilled. But there's that disconnect, and I think sometimes like people are throwing some blockchain use cases that are a little uh, too optimistic on what the technology can do. There's basic breaks between the blockchain and the real world that cannot be mediated. That's it. There's a disconnect.
So I feel like with the injections, you're actually having problems with like the manufacturers. There's something in the supply chain that's a problem. It's not generally when it gets to a doctor's office that is injecting you, they're not swapping out stuff at that doctor because the doctor doesn't have a lab with stuff to do that. Whereas you know, with bars, you absolutely there's a huge problem with especially with who's working at the bar that night, all kinds of stuff. So there is a disconnect there, but I think with the actual like cosmetic stuff, there's actually it's a more reasonable use case. And as far as you're kind of at the bar level, you just kind of have to have trusted sources. And if you went somewhere that you knew was watering down their whiskey, you'd have to have some source to tell people.
I agree, but even in the case of Botox, and now what you're saying is that because the doctor is the one distributing, you can trust the doctor. I don't necessarily should trust every single doctor. For example, in New York, I've heard enough like nightmare scenarios. And on top of that, even if okay, fine, all doctors are trustworthy, then again, that doctor is the trust chain that breaks the connection between the blockchain and the real world. We just got to recognize that there's these centralization points of trust that make the system breakable. And that's okay. Maybe we all trust the doctors and that works, but we need to recognize those are the weaknesses. It's not an ideal system by far.
I think as long as people are involved, there is no ideal system. Like that's just kind of the code can do as much as it can do. You cannot rely on the code to make people good. So as soon as you have this kind of dissection from blockchain to people, every single circumstance on blockchain has the problem you're talking about. Not specifically to any one of these things. As soon as you have people involved that can do anything with what outside of blockchain, you have a disconnect of trust. So you kind of have to have these trusted parties. Um, Centralization is not bad in the sense of centralization. Like most people, when they think of decentralization, they just think of taking power away from government and moving it to somewhere else. But people really like centralized sources of trust. They just like lots of them. So if one goes bad, they can go to another one. They don't like one source of centralization. Centralization just means that you have these trusted parties. Like if two people decide that this party is trusted, you have some sense of centralization. It's just where, I don't think there's any way when you take blockchain things and give them to people and put a person that mitigates any part of this, that you don't have gamification ability. Like I don't know how you can mitigate that at any part of blockchain where people are involved.
Excellent. I think we'll stop at that. I think at the point of trying to get people to participate, you may want to think of ways to incentivize them properly so that they're not gamifying the system. And that's like a whole nother discussion, which we will continue next week. We try to keep these 1 hour long. I appreciate everyone's input today. Thank you so much for joining us, for presenting at the virtual Infiom Salon, our presenters, and all the speakers in the clubhouse and all the participants in the clubhouse. We have a very basic room that we do every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we actually discuss things like what is a DAO, what's an NFT, what is DeFi. And Jeanette was managing the room this last Tuesday, talking about how to mint NFTs. So if you'd like to come back and join her in that discussion, we will be continuing it because it was quite fascinating, and I like to hear more about it. So see you next Tuesday at 10, and we'll be back here in the same room next Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. And thanks everyone so much for joining us.
Just briefly, who was the factory contact guy, the supply chain guy? I couldn't see who was talking. Was it George or Jordan? Sorry.
Jordan.
Jordan? Okay. Oh, well, Jordan just left. Okay. And Eric, what happened to Eric? Do you know Eric personally?
Eric left as well. But
Sorry, I
if
accidentally
you
jumped out.
Jordan, yeah, you can follow Jordan there. But with Eric, I can send you his information. Just you either follow me on Clubhouse or email me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you got it. It's done. I followed on Clubhouse. It's just that it kind of was frustrating because he didn't have any social medias linked in to his connection. Yeah, URLs. So I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, we invite our presenters, and they're not necessarily Clubhouse ready in some ways. Maybe we should give a little
I was going to
summary.
say I will
Yeah.
happily onboard them pre
Okay.
Clubhouse appearance if you would like me to.
That would be awesome. We used to have, this is so funny, Adrian. We used to have a Zoom pre-production session, but we should have a Clubhouse pre-production, and we'll invite you. Okay, definitely.
I can literally pull out from my multi-platform virtual events book like the 6 pages on how to set up your Clubhouse profile for success. And we can
awesome.
send them that and then give them the little things like please mute when you're not speaking and all those other things. Please have it actually be your face. Unless you're an NFT artist, then you can have it be your art. But otherwise, we want to see your pretty face.
Done. Let's do it.
Okay.
For sure. And we will have them contact you if they have questions. How's that?
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, again, and for everything that you do for this room and for the club and for the Infiom network. I appreciate it and look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.